right, so I want to talk about ceilings today. Before we though get going on that topic, I want to talk a tiny bit about floors again. Does the idea of floors kind of make sense to everybody? How you generate a floor type, how you create a floor type? If it doesn't, creating ceilings today will hopefully solidify that, because we create ceilings, we physically draw them the same way we do floors, so that the procedure is going to be pretty identical to that. So we'll go back over that. But I want to talk about floors a little bit because ceilings are essentially the underside of a floor, right? And I just want to clarify a few things about that. I'm going to show you a new command here. I'm in 3D view right now, and obviously I don't have a roof on my little project here yet, right? But if I'm in a 3D view, and this only works in a 3D view, if you come over here to our properties dialog box, you will see something called section box right there. And if I click on that, I get this little invisible section box around my little project, okay? And if I click on it, right, then I get these little grips. And if I drag these little grips in, it sort of allows me to view my model differently than I was viewing it before. Now, if there'd been a roof on there, right, I couldn't really see the interior of that project. And that makes it kind of difficult to build things, because we want to be able to see the things that we're building inside of our little project, right? So I'm going to just turn on my little section box here, and you can, bring it down and look at the floor plan through the roof, or bring the site in here, right, and take a peek inside your house. And the nice thing about section box is that it's a temporary thing. So I can come back over here, hit escape, turn off section box, right, and it goes away. And I can turn it back on and it resets itself, and I can continue to section away. Okay, so that's going to be something really helpful for you in creating geometry in your projects, is the section box. Okay, but one thing I want to talk about with regards to floors is this, all right, and it has to do with ceilings, because again, ceilings are sort of the underside of a floor. Now, there's you're probably, maybe you've thought this, maybe you haven't, but if you haven't, I'm going to kind of explain it to you. And I have a floor assembly here, right? And if I click on the floor assembly and I hit edit type, I can edit my structure here, and I can see what my structure of my floor is made of. So this one is a structural wood floor, 9¼ inch joist with 3/4 inch plywood. Great. Okay. If you haven't been tempted already, you might be, when we start talking about ceilings, to think, well, this is kind of the upper level main floor, and I want to have a gypsum board ceiling kind of on the main level, so why couldn't I, in my floor assembly, just add gypsum board to the underside of my floor, and then I have a built-in ceiling, right? And I don't have to draw another ceiling in there, which is not a pain in the neck, but it's another step, right? And the reason that we don't want to do that, and that we actually want to generate, quote, real ceilings in our project, is because of things that will host to that ceiling, okay? So right now, this floor slab, it's defined as a floor. And so only things that are defined to be hosted onto a floor will kind of stick to that floor, okay? So if I, for example, let me go and download or load in a light family, which is what we want to put on a ceiling plan, right? We want to put lights, we want to put smoke detectors, we want to show, switching and electrical lines and different things like that. Architectural, power, no, not distribution, terminals. Oh, where are the lights? No. Lighting, of course. Is that where I was before, right? Architectural. I don't remember where I was before. Anyway, so I'm going to grab a ceiling light. Okay, it's a flat round ceiling light. I'm going to hit open. So I've just loaded in a family. We briefly talked about this last time, right? So if I wanted to use that ceiling or that light, and I wanted to put it on the ceiling, which would be kind of the underside of my floor slab, thinking, oh, I've built my ceiling into my floor slab, right? I would go to architecture. That's a component. The ceiling light is a component. There's my ceiling light, and I would try and click, 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 place it. And it's not working, right? And I'm thinking, well, I put the gypsum board there and it should be working. I want my lights in there so I don't have to, so I can show them. Bless you. And the reason why my lights are not hosting into that ceiling is because it's not actually a ceiling, right? It's a floor. And it has gypsum board on the underside of it, okay? So when we go and it's time to create ceilings and create lighting plans, you do have to go into your model and create an actual ceiling. You can't just place, gypsum board on the bottom side of your floor and call it a ceiling, because those items won't host to that, right? So it's kind of my little caveat for the night. Make sure that you always put an actual ceiling in your project, okay? Let's talk about what a ceiling actually is, all right? A ceiling, it's a horizontal element that you generate in your Revit models. They can be flat in Revit models. They can be sloped in Revit models. You can put them at different heights in your Revit models. You can create dropped soffits with them in your Revit models, right? So they're really versatile. But essentially, they kind of act exactly like a floor in Revit, all right? So you draw them just like a floor, and they host items just like a floor will, and they're a horizontal assembly just like a floor is, okay? You also create them just like you would a floor, all right? So when I want to create a brand new type, I'm going to select the ceiling closest to the new type I want to generate, hit edit type, duplicate, rename, redefine, and use in your project, okay? So that is sort of the definition of a ceiling. They're elements that will host other items like lights, as we've kind of been talking about. They can be tagged, which is really great. And we sketch them, or we create them, the boundary of them, using the sketch tool, just like we do with a floor, okay? You assign them to a level. However, the levels function just slightly different than a floor, which we'll talk about as well, okay? So let's talk about creating ceilings, all right? And tonight I'm going to talk about how to generate a ceiling. I'm going to show you how to host items into a ceiling. I'm going to show you how to create a soffit, a dropped soffit. And I'm also going to very quickly show you how to create a sloped ceiling. And then when we actually have a sloped roof next time, when we learn how to create roofs, I'll show you how to match the slope of the ceiling to the roof, right? So I won't show you exactly how to do that tonight. I'll show you the slope command, but not how to get it right with the roof, okay? All right, so let's talk about how we're going to create a ceiling. Now, you probably have noticed over here in your project browser that whenever you create a floor plan level that has an actual floor plan associated with it, you also, under this little area called ceiling plans, you get a ceiling plan that also generates. Okay. Normally when I'm working in Revit, I will close up this ceiling plan area. And I do that because it's confusing. These all have the same name as these, right? And so if you accidentally click on click level 1, it does somewhat look different, but when you're brand new at Revit, you may just think nothing of it maybe, right? And so it can be really confusing when you just see level 1 and you need to be on level 1. Right? So normally when I'm kind of just beginning drafting in here, I will close up ceiling plans until I need to, access them, okay? But let me just now tell you, right, we have, for every floor plan that has a level associated with it, we also have a ceiling plan associated with that, all right? So the way that a ceiling plan works, all right, is the same way a floor plan works, it's just looking up. So when you create a floor plan, okay, level 1 right here, and I'm going to point something out to you on the properties of level 1. You'll notice that, or let me show you a setting that you may not have seen before. I'm going to go to this setting called View Range right here, and I'm going to hit Edit. On my floor plan, associated level number 1, all right, I have a cut plane, I have a top, and I have a bottom, all right? And this view range, we'll talk about this view range not just yet, but we will eventually. This view range will allow you to manipulate what you visually can see in Revit, okay? It's a helpful tool. It's a very confusing tool, but it gives a good illustration of what I need to talk about next, okay? So the top, I'm talking about floor plans right now. The top of my floor plan range right now, as it currently stands, is 7'6" above my level 1. Okay, so if this line right here is level 1, okay, my level 1 extends up 7'6" above that line. And the only thing that really sort of matters to you right now, and it doesn't even really matter to you, that is the volumetric height of that room that's been defined in Revit. All right, so if I place a name tag in one of my rooms, and a volumetric room is actually generated, that's how tall that room is. Okay, it doesn't really mean that from level 1 to level 2 there's only 7'6", even if you've defined it to be 10 feet. It just means that if we define a room in there with the a room tag, that's how tall that room is. Okay, then I have a cut plane. It's at 4 feet. So that means that my primary cut range, that is where the floor plan is cut. So if in this case it's 4 feet. So if I took this building we're in and I chopped off the top at 4 feet above our floor plate, anything that was cut, right, all the walls, the windows, that's what I'd see. So that's what it means by cut plane. I'm seeing things at 4 foot above the floor. And the bottom is, with my associated level 1, 0. So my level that I'm viewing at is 0. If I put that to like -3 feet, I could see things 3 feet below level 1, right? And you would say, well, why is that helpful, right? Why is that helpful? Well, there's weird buildings out there, right? That like Trolley Square has tunnels below it. And so when I worked on a project at Trolley Square, I wanted to be able to indicate on the floor plan where the tunnels were. And so I would set my view, the bottom of my view range, just a little bit below my floor plate so that not only could I see my level 1, but I could dash in those tunnels below there, okay? And then my view depth, all right? My view depth is from all the way down here, okay, all the way however far I can see below my associated level all the way to the top. That's my view depth. It's confusing, right? This little graphic has made it immensely better once you understand the idea of a view range, but this topic is super difficult, okay? And it's one of those things even now when I'm trying to make it work, I just get in there and start typing numbers that I think are gonna work, and I just, work through it till it does, I guess, sometimes. But in general, the top of my view range, the bottom of my view range, my cut plane, those are the 3 things I'm really gonna be worried about, okay? But essentially what this graphic is telling me is that I am taking at a 4 foot cut and I'm looking down, all right? Okay, I'm gonna go to the same level 1 under my ceiling plan. I'm gonna look at my view range. In this case, my view depth, even though I'm looking at my ceiling plan for level 1, I am looking at level 2, looking down at a 7 foot mark above associated level 1. So instead of looking down from level 1, standing on level 1 and looking down, we are standing essentially, we're standing on level 2 but looking down, but really what it means is you're standing on level 1 and looking up, right, to level 2. And the cut plane is 7'6" above level 1 as opposed to being cut at 4 foot on level 1. It's really confusing. But a simple way of saying it is that instead of looking down, you're looking up, right? And instead of your cut plane being at 4 foot looking down, your cut plane is at 7'6" and you're looking up. Okay? So if we thought about that in terms of this room, if we look at that door right there, that door is probably like 6'8", 7 foot tall door, right? If I look at it, if my cut plane was 7'6", it would be above that door and I'd be looking up at the ceiling, right? So if we were to look at a 7'6" ceiling cut plane in this room, I wouldn't see any of these doors, I wouldn't see any of these windows because my cut plate would be just above them all, right? And I'd be looking up and I would see all of the ceiling equipment. So the grid, and I would see the ceiling tiles and the lights and the projector and all that good stuff, okay? So I will probably adjust our view range in our ceiling plans, and I will likely bring it down just a little bit to like 6'6", so that my view range cuts all the doors and windows and I can still orient myself in the space. Does that make sense? Because I can see the doors and windows, the architectural elements, and then I'll still look up. Okay? I'll talk about it continually, the view range topic, because it's really confusing. All right, so if I look at this right now, I can see a few things with this view range. Let me change this to 1/4 inch. And I want to remind you, I'm on my level 1 ceiling plan right now. So it's essentially as if I were standing on level 1 looking up, and I can only see things from a 7'6" plane upward. If I click on my view range here, and I change this to 6'6", you see how all those things come back that weren't viewed before, right? So I see those doors now. I see whatever windows I have. I don't have a lot of elements in here, right? I have a few things, but now I'm starting to see those other things happen. Okay, and let me go back to my view range again. Luckily this is on video, so we'll remember how to do it, right? But if I change that to 8 foot, and I hit OK, even some of those windows go away. These doors are 96 inches, right? So they just barely hit the mark for that view range I created. So I'm going to click on my view range, and I'm going to make this 6'6" and hit OK. All right, so here's my ceiling plan. We're still seeing all of, where the doors are. We're seeing where the windows are. Oh, you see there's my floor, so I am looking up, and I don't have a ceiling in there yet, so I'm seeing the floor above, okay? And I made those goofy openings. I'm going to click, get rid of those. Well, at least one of them for now, and hit OK, finish. Okay, so I'm seeing my floor above, but I don't see a ceiling because I don't have one in there. I'm still seeing all my structural grids, right, which is pretty helpful. And at least it allows me to orient myself. I'm seeing my exterior elevation markers. I'm seeing my section markers, right? So I'm still seeing all of the annotation from my floor plans, essentially. I still have a lot of my visual settings down here. I have scale, of course, that I can set. I have my fine, medium, coarse. I'll change this to fine. And then my wall assembly pops up. We saw that fine detail come back. I do still have the ability to crop or not crop my view. I have my crop region, right? There's my crop region that I can turn on or off, which is nice to know about. I have my temporary height isolate. I have all the same things that I need, okay? I also, one thing I want to point out is that this reflected ceiling plan, the RCP, you'll hear that a lot, okay? It functions just like a regular floor plan in that I can drag it onto a sheet and make a sheet out of it, okay? So I just wanted to kind of point that out as well. All right. Oh, one thing I want to point out here, my interior elevation marker, remember I created that, that is still showing up here. And I want to point one quick thing out about some elevations. So my elevation, do you see how I have this kind of bounding region, the crop region around my elevation, right? And it goes from level 1 all the way up to level 2. If the top of my elevation range, do you see meaning my crop region, if that falls below the view range of my reflected ceiling plan, see how that one went away? This is kind of a weird oddity that you might see happen. And it went away because the top of my elevation is set below where that cut plane happens, that view range, right? So when I bump it back up, all of a sudden that little elevation is back. Okay, so if you have a problem with an elevation, and that's what's happening. And that can happen with interior elevations and also exterior elevations. Okay. All right. So let's talk about creating ceilings, right? That's all the sort of, I guess, theory or explanation behind a ceiling. How do we actually generate a ceiling, right? And it's really easy. It's easy in that it's exactly the same as creating a floor, right? Now, here's one thing that I'm going to discuss before I actually create a ceiling, and that is kind of the same topic as with a floor. Do I create one whole floor, right? And then do the finished floor on top of that for each individual room? Or do I, create individual pieces of floor for the whole project? And the discussion we had was that a good sort of practice is to create the structural floor, right? And have that be the main floor that runs the entirety of the building footprint. And then per room to create individual finishes and place those pieces of floor on top of the structural floor, right? So you have kind of that main structural floor integrity, and then the pieces of like tile and wood floor go on top of that, okay? And so I've kind of shown that here, right? Here is my tab. There's my main structural floor. It goes all the way around. And then I've got these little individual finished floors on top. Okay. We somewhat take a different approach with ceilings because while we don't want to attach the ceiling to the bottom of the floor above usually acts as some type of structure for the ceiling, right? Whether you're just screwing drywall to joists or you're, like in this case, we're hanging the ceiling off of the deck above, right? And so essentially, if you think about a ceiling, it's not, I'm going to just real generally, right? It's not considered a structural item. It's a finish type item. And so the floor above is fine to sort of create the enclosure of the lower level, right? And so the ceiling, when I create it, I guess my point is I'm going to create it per room, right? So it's okay not to have like one structural element for the ceiling and then add like the grid or gypsum board or whatever you want it to be. You can just add your ceiling kind of per room, right? Per ceiling type, whatever you want it to be, and that's perfectly all right because the structure is actually the floor above for that ceiling, okay? All right, so I'm in my reflected ceiling plan. I just want to make sure, right? Because we're only going to draw ceilings in our reflected ceiling plan. That's where you draw them. If you draw them in the floor plan level, they won't go and assign themselves to the right level. So I'm going to go to my architecture tab. I'm going to come over here to ceiling. And there's a couple of different ways we can draw a ceiling, all right? Before I show you that, I just, number one, want to point you over here to properties. We have a couple of different ceiling types located in our properties dialog box here. We have a 2x2 acoustic ceiling tile, a 2x4 acoustic ceiling tile, which is what we have in this room here. And then we have a gypsum board on metal stud, okay? So I'm just going to keep I'm going to go to 2x2 acoustic ceiling tile just for fun. We have automatic ceiling and we have sketch ceiling. All right. So automatic ceiling works somewhat like Hatch in AutoCAD, where if I just hover over a room, do you see how I get that little red boundary? And if I click, look, magically I get a ceiling placed, right? You're like, wow, that's really easy, right? If I look over here, a default height of 8 foot is where that ceiling is going to be placed. I can change that if I want. And that's 8 foot above the assigned level. So 8 foot above level 1. So it's kind of fun. You click, you click, you click, and I have all these ceilings really very quickly placed. Okay. Okay. If I go back and I sort of tab and I want to select that ceiling, let me select, oops, escape. Okay, a ceiling is sort of like a floor in that when I'm selecting it, I kind of like to go near an opening and tab. Oh, there's my ceiling, and click and grab it. Okay. You're going to see that ceiling, the way that it was drawn, if I click on it and I hit edit boundary, just like I would a floor, or I double click on it and enter sketch mode, you're going to see where that ceiling is drawn to. So this one is drawn to the face of that drywall. Okay. So the one thing that I like about my automatic ceiling is that it's just so fast. list. You can, you got a project with 400 rooms, you can just click, 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 and it just senses a boundary and it creates that ceiling, and it's just really great. Okay. One thing I don't like about it is that I can't very easily control where it places that boundary, right? So you just want to know that, right? So if you don't really care where the ceiling goes to with regard to the wall, then by all means just use that automatic sketch and just go for it, right? But if you care that maybe it goes to the stud line instead of the face of the drywall, then you'll just want to be able to draw it in, okay? Even if I draw it with the automatic sketch though, and I make a mistake and I need to change it, obviously you notice that I can double click on it, I can edit it, and I can come in here and I can align it, move it, alter these lines. I'm just using my arrows to nudge, right? And I can put them wherever I need them to be. I can AL align, tab, click, click, and align it to wherever it needs to go, okay? So another maybe methodology, you can either auto sketch it, goes in really easy, you can sketch it, or you can auto sketch and then go in and fine tune it, however you want it to be. So I'm just gonna get out of that. All right, so I placed these ceilings, they look wonderful. If I go into my section view here, right, or if I wanna go back into my section box here, okay, and I look inside my, where are those? Where did I put those ceilings? There we go. Now I can see my little ceilings, how cute they are, right? In all of their little respective spaces, okay? Now you're thinking, hey, those don't go all the way to the underside of the floor, right? They are just floating below that. And the reason for that is because they were placed at 8 feet. They weren't placed to the underside of the structure, okay? So if I actually wanted those to go to rest underneath, on the bottom side of the floor, I would click on it and I could change it to bottom of joist level 1. Oh, with a 0 offset. Hopefully that worked. Where did it go? Hold on, let me I'm gonna go to my section here real quick and look at it a little better. Let's see. There's my little ceiling. And instead of being at 8 foot, oh, well, that's why. Because I did place it, no, 8 foot above there. Oh, that just worked out perfectly, didn't, that was totally not, very serendipitous. So that was placed randomly at an 8 foot height, which actually when we were messing around with our floor joist depth ended up being the exact same number as that bottom of that joist level right there. It's kind of weird. Let's place this joist thing right there. There we go. Bottom of joist level 2, and we'll place this at bottom of joist level 2 with a 0 foot offset. And oh, now it's in line with it, but that ceiling has a thickness, okay? And I'm going to use my dimensions, DI, and I'm going to measure that. That's 2 1/4 inches. So I'm going to give that a 2 1/4 inch offset in the negative direction. Oop, come on. There we go. And there we go. Our little ceiling is where it needs to be. Okay. Of course, I'm going to hit undo. I went through all of that and I could have just aligned AL, click, click, and that worked just as well, right? Okay. All right, so that's how we're going to place ceilings. That's how we're going to somewhat get them at the right level, right? I'm going to go back to my level 1 ceiling plan here. And of course, I would sort of either, as I'm placing these, predefine the height of the level, right? Assign it to a level, do whatever I need to do to get these at the right height, okay? I can also, once I'm done with these, I can select it and I can change what type of ceiling type it is. So that went from the 2x2 lay in there to gypsum board. And I'll drag my section over. We'll just take a look at that. Right, there's my gypsum board. Ooh, runs into the door right there. We don't like that, do we? So we'll just align it with the ceiling. Okay. One thing that sort of bothers me about the Revit out of the box gypsum board is it doesn't really look like gypsum board, right? If I go to hidden line HL, it's just a blank, it's just blank, it's white, which I don't like because I like to see a little pattern distinguished, okay? So we'll talk about that in a second. But one other thing I want to kind of tell you about, and this is really great after you've worked with AutoCAD for a really long time. One nice thing about the patterning on ceilings in Revit is that they can be adjusted, right? So if you've ever done a reflected ceiling plan in AutoCAD, and well, you can somewhat move the hatch pattern around, but not as easy as this. And you know, you want to have your ceiling pattern centered on the space, right? This one actually looks like from here to here it might be, but from here to, oh yeah, it looks like when you do the auto sketch, they've gotten smart. Didn't used to do that. This does actually look like it's centered, so that's pretty nice, right? But if I wanted to, I can click on one of those lines and I can drag it and I can change where that pattern falls, okay? So that's pretty nice. I can also align from room to room, so AL, click, click, and I can align those patterns so that they very nicely go from room to room very seamlessly, which is really great. Okay. I'm going to show you a little trick here, and this is going to be something that you'll do with a lot of different elements in Revit. I'm going to show you how to equalize distances. Okay, so I'm going to go to Dimension, DI, and let's say that I wanted to make it so that, and it looks like it is, but we'll pretend it's not. Let's do that. Our ceiling tile grid is not equally spaced inside here, and we don't like that. We want it equally spaced. Okay, I'm going to DI dimension this from wherever I want where I want it centered about. So from one side of the wall, I want to take that line and I want to center it in the space. So essentially what I've done is said from here to here, I want that line to be in the middle. Okay. Something you may not have noticed about dimensions is that when I have this type of dimension, I get a little equal sign here. Okay. And this, what I'm doing here is something you can do with any type of element in Revit. All right. If I click on equal, did you see what happened? Let me undo that. This is magic when you've been working in AutoCAD forever. I click on it, equal, and that little ceiling grid moves. Okay. If I wanted to make this door be equal between these two walls, I could dimension, DI, click on that wall, click on the center line of my door, click over on that wall, click and space, equal, and now that door is equal between those two walls. Right?
I noticed there's an EQ there. How would you be able to, can you look at and see what that dimension is?
So in this case, if I wanted to, not within this case.
Gotcha.
So if I wanted it to do that, then I would have to go back and just really kind of dimension it.
And just pull the dimension after it's been adjusted.
Exactly. Yep. Yep. So you can do that with any element. So if I wanted to center this wall between here and here, I'm going to use dimensions and put an equality constraint on it. Same thing with this door. If I want it centered here, I'm going to use dimensions to put that equality constraint between the two. Okay, I'm going to DI. I want to center this window here between these two walls. Equal. There we go. Pulls it right over. Delete. Okay. All right, so we can equalize where the ceiling grid is going to go. I can equalize other elements in Revit if I want to. Okay. Let me talk about this ceiling type a little bit and how I can change what the hatch pattern looks like. So I'm going to select the ceiling, and again, actually surprisingly having a really easy time selecting these things, which is just usually not the case, right? It's really hard to sort of select. See, I can't even, I'm clicking, I can't get it. In this case, I can select that, right? Click, and something happens. But it's a little bit harder, to pick some of these kind of, flat horizontal items in Revit. So I'm clicking, I'm not getting it. So I go near an opening near the boundary, and you see it still is, saying wall. So I'm going to tab. Oh, there I go. I think I got the boundary of my ceiling. So I click, and there it is. Okay. Now, just like the floor assembly, to see what this is made out of, I'm going to hit edit type when it's selected. Okay. I have a structure here. I hit edit type. This all should look pretty familiar at this point. And I can see that my core boundary here, the structure, is a metal stud layer, and I have gypsum wallboard, 5/8 inch. Great. Okay. So I can change these, right? I can do whatever I need to do. If I wanted to add more gypsum board, I can do that. I'm not going to go over that a whole lot right now because I think you guys should all be pretty familiar with that, right? Creating wall types, creating floor types, now creating ceiling types, and on Wednesday creating roof types, right? You'll be very used to creating different types and working in this dialog box, all right? But what I am going to do is, I was kind of complaining that I don't see a gypsum board hatch on my ceiling here, all right? So I'm going to change that. Under gypsum board wall, I'm going to click here. I'm going to click on that little ellipse. Oop. And I'm in my materials editor, right? This is also should be a pretty familiar place to you all. You know that you can search and find different materials to put in your assemblies, okay? If I click on gypsum wallboard, I want to show you some visual things that maybe you might have noticed, you may not have noticed, okay? Over here you can see we have a cut pattern. That means if I use a section and I slice that in half, I will see this as my cut pattern, sand. Great. I also have a surface pattern here, okay? So in the foreground, it shows no pattern. So that's why I get a big blank slate for my ceiling as I'm drawing it, which I don't like. So if I change this, I click here, I'm allowed to pick a hatch. So Revit really has a poor selection of hatches, right? I'm still very, after all these years, disappointed with it. They've gotten a little bit better, but number one, they have a poor selection, and number two, it's a gigantic pain to get new ones in there, right? So I try and use the ones out of the box because I just plain don't like trying to get new ones in there. So I think sand, we'll do dense sand is likely, well actually I think there's a gypsum board one in here. Yeah, there is. We use gypsum plaster. I'm going to hit OK. And now anything that has gypsum wallboard assigned to it will have a surface pattern of gypsum plaster. I hit OK. I hit OK again. OK again. And now you see that we have the gypsum board there. Okay. Now, one thing I just want to remind you about, Revit, has a lot of settings that are connected, and so not only does that gypsum board apply to just my gypsum board ceiling, right, but it also applies to my gypsum board walls. So now my walls actually have that pattern on them as well. So it doesn't bother me. I don't mind that pattern, especially when it prints. It's very light, so it doesn't bother me too much. But now I can sort of see that this is a gypsum ceiling and this is a lay-in ceiling. I can click on that ceiling and I can change it. All right, there's a 2x4. There is a gypsum board again. Okay, looks pretty good. All right, any questions on ceilings so far? Okay. Not too bad. They're really very similar to floors. All right, a couple more things here about ceilings. So I did show you that, I guess I showed you the automatic function, right? And I kind of explained there's a sketch option, so I breezed over it. But if I click on ceiling, I have auto, which we've already done. I'm going to click on sketch. So if I did want to sketch a ceiling, I could, right? I could use these lines, and I could come in here, and I'm going to grab oh, that one already has one. We'll just do a quick ceiling here. I could do a quick ceiling like right there. All right, AL align. I can use all of my different tools. AL align. Here we go. Finish, and there's another little piece of ceiling. So I can sketch it in if I wanted to. Okay. All right. So we have the automatic, we have the sketch mode to create ceilings. You know how to edit the assembly of our ceilings. If you want to, well, number one, we can place them at whatever height we want to place them at, right? But if you want to sort of have some help lining these ceilings up, draw a section. Okay, we talked about drawing sections. It's very easy. Section, click. Right, you'll see me drawing sections in my model that I never intend to use again. I use it to help me, you know, get my geometry where it needs to go. So click on that section, and maybe I was just drawing that section to see where my ceiling was, and AL align, click. That's where my ceiling needs to go, right? I needed that section to align it. And then I click on that section, whoop, delete, okay, and it's gone, right? So you can pull these views, you can delete them when you don't need them anymore, but they're very helpful to help you generate geometry, okay? All right, so let's see. We can alter the assembly. We can, let's see, draw them using auto and sketch. We can look at building sections to align them to the structure above. We know that we should create a ceiling. We don't want to just add a finish to the bottom of our floors because these are defined as hosting elements for things, for ceilings, okay? So before, when I tried to place a light on the underside of my floor, which I had a piece of gypsum board defined to, it didn't work. If I go to component now and I use that same light, oh, look at that. Cute little lights going in there. This is just so wonderful. And not only can I see them in my ceiling plan view, but if I create a section right there and I look at it, oh, look at that. Right? It's a nice thing about Revit. You place these objects in one view and you can see them in all the other views that they're associated with. Okay? So now I can start placing lights if I want to. And if I want those lights to be equally spaced in this room, dimension, DI, and I can grab the center point, go to the next wall, pull it up, equal, click, and they're equal, right? DI, dimension, here we go. And although I love this functionality, I get super bored doing it all the time, right? Because I'm actually adding quite a few dimensions that I don't really need, you know? Okay, so that looks pretty good. It's equally spaced from here to here to here. It's equally spaced from here to here to here. This light is. Now I can use a line, AL. Oop, and I can start, right, AL. Here we go, AL. Those are sort of close together, right? But you guys get the idea. And I can click on my dimension, hit delete. Okay. Oop, click, delete. Okay. That one didn't quite. AL, behave. There we go. Okay. And there's a lot of lights to choose from in Revit. And let me just remind you how you go and get lights. So if I go to Insert, Load Family, I can go to Lighting. Where did I go before? Electrical? It was electrical. Well, I went to that one first, I think, and I couldn't find what I needed. I mean, come on, right? It's just so convoluted. Here's another really good one. Let's see. Let's see if I can find it again. Revit never used to have like a dishwasher or a fridge or anything in there, so I haven't really looked for them for years because they just never used to have it. And then I think the other day somebody was talking about it, and they said, do they have it now? And I said, I don't know. If it's not under appliances or furniture, maybe it's under specialty equipment, right? So we kind of looked around. I was like, no, I don't see it. But what I didn't really realize is that domestic specialty equipment actually means lots of good stuff, right? So I want a coffee system. Built-in ovens, mid-range, cooktops, dryers, all this good stuff. And they didn't actually used to have all this stuff in here. So I hadn't looked for it for a long time because I'd found the ones I really liked on Revit City and used those. But look at that, a little kitchenette. You have a fridge, you've got all that good stuff. A countertop, a cooktop, a sink. Sorry, that was kind of off topic, but I just wanted to point out where that was for all you guys to use. Start planning your kitchens and stuff in here. But under lighting, architectural, we have internal, meaning inside the house, and external, right, meaning outside the house. Not any really good ones for residential, but we've got a lot of good stuff, right? So you have a lot of lights that you can pick from. We have lamps, floor lamps. Floor lamps would actually host to the floor, not to the ceiling. 2019 actually has a bunch more that I don't remember seeing in here. A pendant linear one, so I'm going to hit open on that. Okay, so you can really go in there and find a lot of different light fixtures you want to use. Component, now you see pendant, linear, lamp, and if I want to put it, you know, in my acoustic ceiling tile, click, and there you go. And I'm going to go into 3D mode. I want to see that little light inside my living room, wherever that was, right? Oh, look how cute it is. For real, right? So great. And it's, you know, it's going to host itself to the ceiling. Anyway, so you don't really, I mean, it's associated with level 1, but it's smart enough to know that when you place the component, it's going to place itself to the underside of the ceiling, wherever that may be. Okay?
So if you move the ceiling, it'll travel with it.
Yes. Yep. So if we say 8'6", apply, look at that, it remembers, or not remembers, but it's attached. Yes. Okay, so lots of good things happening with ceilings, right, that make our lives a whole lot easier than they used to be. And it looks like Revit 2019, even from 2018, it looks like they have a bunch more families in there that you can use. Okay. All right, so we can create new ceiling types, we can edit their assemblies, we know how to auto sketch our ceilings, we know how to sketch our ceilings, we know that ceilings have a default 8-foot offset, but that we can go into sectional view or override that, right, by typing it in. I think I said this, but lights host to Revit ceilings. Anything that is defined to host to a ceiling will host to a ceiling. So you can go and find things like fire sprinkling equipment or projectors or whatever, you know, whatever goes on a ceiling, you can find it and you can put it on your ceiling, which is great. I'm going to go do a little sectional view and you can just kind of look how nice that is. I love it. You love it till you hate it, I guess, is my, it's wonderful. Okay, so let's talk about, there's just a couple other things I want to talk about with regards to lights tonight, and one of them is adding a soffit, okay? So I say the term soffit, and essentially what the term soffit means is a dropped or a lower portion of a ceiling in a room, right? So in this case, we don't have a soffit in here, but, you know, for example, in the hallway, I think the hallway, you know, you might have an area that's lower, right, to accommodate ductwork or structure, or maybe it's just aesthetic, right? But sometimes you'll have little dropped areas for ducts. But essentially, a soffit is going to be a lower portion of a ceiling in a space, okay? So I want to show you how to accommodate that and how to make it look right. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to drop this little hallway. I'm going to make this a soffited area, okay? So right now my ceiling, if I click on it in sectional view, is 8'6", and I want to make it at 7'6" above level 1. I'm going to type 7'6", and you see we have a dropped soffited area, and the rest of the ceiling is just going to be up at the level of, you know, where the floor joists come in, okay? Maybe we have a heat duct that needs to run through there, or a beam, or, you know, something needs to go in there. So I want to accommodate that. So everything looks good there. I go in and I create my ceiling and I drop it down a foot, right? And then I come in here and I think, well, I'm going to create the rest of my ceiling. So the rest of this area. Sketch my ceiling. And we'll make this one, we'll do the same ceiling tile, but I'm just going to kind of quickly draw it in here. There we go. Oof, that was bad, huh? How did I manage whatever I did there? Oh, well, that's why. It's a bad drafting, right? Minus a few points there. All right. And I'm not going to go around my wall. I'm just going to be sloppy again. Okay. So my other portion of the ceiling, this is going to be at, I want it to the underside of my joist, which I don't know exactly how far that is. So I'm just going to hit finish and it looks good. And then again, of course, I'm going to go into my section and I'm just going to align it AL to the bottom of my joist, which means that I have a ceiling here and I have a ceiling there and I have a light there. Of course, my doors are all here, but that's really weird, right? That's not how it usually works. Usually there's some type of enclosure right there so that the ceiling comes up. You have some drywall or something or some other type of ceiling, and then this ceiling continues on, okay? So when I say I want to show you how to create a dropped soffit, I think everybody gets the idea that this ceiling is lower than that ceiling, but they don't really know how to close it off, okay? So I'm going to show you how to close that off, essentially, right there. And it's not horrible to do, but it's just somewhat inconvenient, all right? Now, let's see, I'm going to, yeah, we'll just, let's see, I'm going to, this is really weird, but I'm going to add a couple of things in here real quick. Let me just go to Insert, Load Family, and we'll go to back to our specialties. I'm a little bit bitter about this. A little kitchenette, we'll open that up. We're going to put it in a really weird spot. So I opened up that kitchenette, and I'm going to go to my main level 1. It's my floor plan. And we're just going to pretend that's not a bedroom. And I'm going to go to component, my little kitchenette, and I'm just going to spacebar, 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 spacebar. We're going to put our kitchenette right there. Click. Okay. Now the reason I wanted to place that there was just so there was something inside of this room, and that is because I'm going to put a little camera in here, right? We're not going to worry about cameras too much in this class. Is anybody taking rendering, modeling and rendering? Okay. Chuck was like, no. If you happen to want to do it over a summer for fun, this would be very helpful, right? But in modeling and rendering, you'll learn how to place cameras and do walkthroughs and create photorealistic renderings of these spaces, right? And so if I put a little camera view in here, and, you know, I want to view into my space, I mean, number one, how descriptive is that for a client who has no idea what space is supposed to look like, right? But I guess the main thing I want to show you here is here's my kitchenette, there's my drop soffit, there's my ceiling. So obviously we can't leave it like that. So in sectional view it looks wrong, and if you were to place any cameras and render it, it wouldn't look right either. Okay, so we have to close that gap, and the way that we're going to do that is with a wall. All right. And so what I have to do here is I have to place a wall, and I have to place it in my floor plan, level 1, and I have to give it a base offset so that it doesn't go to the floor, but it starts, you know, where I want it to start. Let's say we want it to start right here. That's lay-in. This is going to be wonky. We're going to put a gypsum board soffit right there. But we'll just have it come down to here. We want it to go from here all the way up and fill that gap, right? So our stud wall and our gypsum board is just going to live right in that nice little space, okay? And so I'm going to window tile, WT. There we go. And I'm going to draw a wall in here that's going to go right there. So in my level 1, I'm going to click on wall. And I may not quite know where it goes, right? In this case I do, but in another case I may not. So I'm going to misalign it just to show you how to get into the right spot. 2x4 wood stud with gypsum on it'll only be on one side, but we'll do 2 sides. And I'm going to draw my wall, and I'm just going to kind of draw it the way I think it should be drawn. So there we go. So there's my wall, and it's obviously not right. Okay, so I'm going to do AL align now. Click, or AL, I want it to be right there. Click, and I'm going to align the base of that. Click, so it goes up where it needs to go, and then I'm going to AL align it with the AL. Click, align it right there. Oh, my ceiling didn't like that, did it? Why would that do that? That's weird. AL. Let me bring it down just a little bit. Why is there a constraint there? Remove constraints. Okay. AL. I'm going to nudge it. Let's see what happens when we nudge it. I can't think of why there'd be a constraint there. What have I done to constrain? Let's look at our level 1 ceiling plan.
Is the wall connecting to the ceiling? Is that the problem?
It's not connecting. It's just sort of, it's saying that there is a relationship between the wall and the ceiling. They're not connected, but there's a relationship. And that when I move one, the other needs to move away from it. Like, it's basically saying, hey, that's great, right? You're putting a wall there, but that wall needs to stay 2 inches away from the ceiling, which I haven't done. So I'm not quite sure why it's doing that. I'm trying to get a little workaround to see if I can make it work. Let's see if we can nudge it. Oh, it's constraining to these walls. There's something going on here. Maybe. A door. Something's happening. You guys understand. Yeah, something's happening. Anyway, that doesn't usually happen. Let me just say this. That doesn't usually happen. And what usually happens is that this little wall very nicely lives in there, right? So that when I go back to my little camera that I had placed, let's see if, oh, I don't think it saved it. Yeah. Let me go back to my little camera here. Level 1 reflected ceiling plan. There we go. Which you could learn in modeling and rendering. I see my little gypsum board wall, so there's not just kind of a gap right there, right? Yeah, so it's not terrible to do, but if you think about like a commercial building, how many drop soffits you have, you know, you'll get a big commercial project going, and a lot of times they'll draw the ceilings in, and then they won't draw those soffits in there, so it looks kind of odd, but that's how you're going to kind of finish off that nice little soffitted area. Okay, and let's see. Okay, soffitted area, so hopefully that makes sense. In your assignment, you're going to draw a little soffitted area, so you'll have, you know, your little wall that has to, you know, allow your 2 ceilings to connect. And just a couple other small things I wanted to point out, and we haven't done this yet, but we will soon. You can tag ceilings, okay? So we can tag doors, we can tag windows, which we know. And looks like you have your little project over there already complete. Look at his showing off over there. He's got his roof on, his clear stories. Looks really good. But you can also tag ceiling types, right, which is really great. So I'm going to go back to my level 1 ceiling plan. I can type TG tag and click on tags. Would you like to load a ceiling tag? Yes. My ceiling tag is an annotation. And let's see. Architectural ceiling tag with height. Sounds good to me. Open. And I'm going to turn off my leader. But 2x2 acoustic ceiling system, 7'6" above finished floor, right? And of course, when you get into an office, we can customize those things and make them look the way we want. But that is really helpful when you're going around on a ceiling plan and you have to input all the different heights of all your ceilings, okay? So that's one thing we can do. And I can also AL align, click, and I can also align those if I need to. So I want you to remember that. Okay. Final thing for tonight. This doesn't have to do with ceiling types, but I just want to show you how to tag rooms, right? And I want to show you how to tag rooms because we want to see them on our main level, and eventually we're going to create a basement, our lower level, right? And I want to be able to see them on the reflected ceiling plans as well. Okay. So I want to show you how to create a room tag, which I don't think I have. Have I showed you how to create a room tag? Maybe. I was thinking that I hadn't. Okay. It's really easy. So to create a room tag, and let me step back a little by saying that you remember when I was showing you the view range and I was saying that 7'6" height above level 1 is the volumetric defined room. Okay. And what I meant by that was the room that you assign to that space, right? And how that's done is assigning a room tag to each room. Okay. So if I go to architecture and I come down here to room, okay, let me have this little video pop up. Okay, so if I click in a space and I see how it's placing those little what are called rooms, okay, that is defining a volumetric space within your Revit model. So if I click on room and then I hover inside an enclosed space that is being bound, so being bound meaning with room bounding elements like walls, doors, windows, and I click, I've just created a room. I'm going to come over here. This is the best thing in Revit to do right here. Click, I placed a room. Click, 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 I just placed a room. So I go into hidden line view. So now I have room 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in here. All right. And if I click on room here, I can click again. Bedroom 01. Right. I can come in here and type bath 02. I can come over here. Bath 03. And by doing this, not only do I place a room tag in there so that I can identify that room, right? But what I'm doing is I'm creating a volume and I'm defining an actual room in the Revit model. So if I go into my sectional view, I'm going to go into my bathroom. And do you see when I hover over that space that it says a room is defined and it's bath 02. So I can hover over that and I know it's there so I can find it, but I click on it. There's my volumetric room. All right. And you're like, yeah, big deal. What does that mean? Well, we can start, when you get really advanced in Revit, you can assign things to rooms like occupancy, or you can assign, engineers use it for calculations, how much air volume needs to go into a room, right? Occupancy types, I'm trying to think of, room finishes. There are like 50,000 different things you can assign to a room, right? And the intent behind that will be to schedule those items, all right? So creating those rooms, number one is helpful because I can get a room tag in there and give it a name, but also because I've just then created a volumetric room, okay? If I click on the tag and I hit delete, it says, hey, a room tag is gone, but the room still exists, right? So that room still exists. I can go up to tag a room, hover over that room, and see it doesn't create a new one, but it recognizes the name that was assigned to that room. Click. Okay. I can also hover over my space. See, I think I just, where did it go? I think I just hit it when I'm going to tab. Where's my room? Let me find one without a bunch of, there we go. Right? There's my room right there. Okay. So we'll call this one living room 05. All right. Now the problem comes in where maybe I have a kitchen over here, but there's no wall to bound it, right? So this room just senses any bounding element and it kind of bleeds into that kitchen space, even though I want it separate. Revit has accommodated that. And we have not only a way to create a room, but a way to separate rooms without adding walls. So if I click on room separator, I can draw a line from one room bounding element to another. So from that wall to that wall. And now my living space only goes to there. And I can go up to room again, come down here, and create a separate room for the kitchen. Okay. That's a pretty easy tool to use, but really powerful in scheduling things when you get kind of really advanced into Revit. Okay. Any questions so far? Good. Ceilings are going to, let me just say this, ceilings are really going to make you navigate around your model. All right. So you're going to be going from floor plan to reflected ceiling plan, and then you're going to put something in there and you're going to say, oh, is it at the right height? I don't know. I'm going to draw a section and I'm going to click, go to my section. I'm going to align it. And then I'm going to pop up here to my 3D view, and I'm going to turn on my section box, on and off, on, right? And I'm going to use that to help me be able to view inside the model and see what's going on, okay? So you're really going to start getting used to navigating your model from now on. And I just want to say, don't be afraid to do that, right? Don't be afraid to navigate, and don't be afraid to create, you know, extra sections to look at things, all right? Sorry guys, I just remembered one thing as I actually navigated right there. One thing I quickly want to tell you, and I'll be done, I promise. You can leave openings in your ceilings, okay? So I'm going to change to a wireframe view because I want to be able to see the floor above my ceiling. So I'm going to go to wireframe. And do you remember how I have, the wireframe allows me to see the opening in my floor above, right? So my floor above has an opening for stairs, okay? If I wanted to create an opening in my ceiling that is the same size as that opening in my floor that will accommodate stairs, I just click on my ceiling and I create an opening just like I would in a floor, right? It's a bounded region. I hit finish, and there I have an opening in my floor there. So if I go into my 3D mode, wherever that was, oh, it's outside. I'm like, wait a minute, we know we did it. There it is. So I have an opening for my stairs in the floor, right? And the ceiling very nicely goes all the way around it. Okay. All right. So next time we'll talk about roofs. And really, we'll talk about roofs, that kind of does it for the main building elements, right? We'll have walls, we'll have floors, we'll have ceilings, we'll have a roof. We'll talk about how to slope roofs next, or how to slope roofs, of course, but then I said we were going to do slope ceilings. I think we're going to not do that tonight, and we'll just do that next time. And I'll show you how to take a ceiling and slope it so that it follows the slope of our roof when we meet next time. Okay. All right. Here you go. Oop.